and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with even 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Beautiful day. I'd like to talk a little bit about Tricycle magazine today. I think most of you are familiar with that publication. It is the Buddhist Quarterly, which means it comes out only once every season. Mine just arrived in the mail 2 days ago, and it's always exciting to see it in print. I'll remind you that in our library downstairs, we have about 20 years worth of copies, and they are timeless. You can take an issue, there are multiple copies. If there's a multiple copy, you can keep that one. But feel free to explore those, because the Dharma talks and articles in them never get old. But because of technology, we not only have that magazine, we now have many, almost daily, online Dharma talks, conferences, classes, workshops, all kinds of additional help for our practice. And I recently decided to take part in one of those. During the week before Earth Day of 2022, Tricycle magazine joined 2 other organizations to sponsor a series of online lectures titled the Buddhism and Ecology Summit, Living the Dharma in a Time of Crisis. I spent the week listening to 16 speakers examine climate crisis from a Buddhist perspective. I could tell from the chat line that people were joining from all over the United States, and in fact, from all over the world. One day I glanced over and saw that 620 people were listening with me. And that reminder that I was part of a worldwide Sangha, that hundreds of people all over the globe were as concerned as I was about life on Earth, was really as moving and helpful as the talks I heard. James Shaheen, the editor of Tricycle, opened the first talk by pointing out that the 3 poisons, greed, anger, and delusion, are harmful enough on their own, but coupled with technology, they harm our environment. The original Buddhist image of the world being on fire was a metaphor. Craving being a flame-like destructive element in human behavior. Craving, trying to get what we want, flares up like fire. Now, however, the flames are literal, and we can see the early references from Buddhist texts almost as predictions for what the planet is experiencing. Similarly, greed, manifested as modern consumerism, leads to actions that literally heat up the planet. Landfills are exploding from the methane overdose in discarded clothing. Originally, Buddhists realized that the 3 poisons caused pain, but adding technology to them, starting with the Industrial Revolution, escalated that pain. Our model of thinking about the world and even our own bodies is as problems to be solved and technology as solutions. Stephen Batchelor responded that there really is no problem, that what we need is not a series of steps to solve something, but practice that gets us out of our minds and allows space for wisdom, compassion, and love to emerge. Shaheen said, We need to turn Buddhism on its head to solve environmental problems. Batchelor responded, yes, we have to step back from Dharma as we practice it, get down to the root of suffering, get rid of the causes. The goal of the Indian religion that was the beginning of our religion was not to be born again. It might be better not to live. We're just passing through. Maybe climate change is suggesting we need to prepare for what follows this life. Maybe it's more important than our time here. Batchelor asked, can we find a view of the Dharma rooted in early texts that Buddha began, but that can provide us with a template to live by? We are task-based. We are about engagement. We don't have to talk about engaged Buddhism because it's already engaged. There isn't unengaged Buddhism. We have to respond to the world as it is. Religious belief and social action are one. The difference between religious and secular belief is that religious belief falls back on something like God that people believe in, while secular belief falls back on the belief that life's worth living. That's all there is. But I am speechless at being alive, the fact that we're all here. The pivotal opportunity of human form I have to insert. Batchelor ended by saying that the global crisis must be addressed by a structure of society, community. He is not optimistic. How do we raise our children? How do we as Buddhists respond to the possibility of extinction? Our response to the crisis in the Ukraine is we need to produce more oil, not how do we shift to a green economy. Our challenge is to do all we can to make it better. Stop eating meat, get an electric car, change how we distribute wealth. So much of the world is carrying on with business as usual. His last comment was to recommend a book called Facing Extinction. David Loy's presentation, called Ecological Crisis as a Spiritual Crisis, echoed James Shaheen's assumption that Buddhism has a challenge in responding to the problems Buddha didn't face. Loy quoted Noam Chomsky's assertion that we are now living in the most dangerous time in human history. How can Buddhism offer a response? Loy begins with the traditional emphasis on impermanence and the delusion of separation. In this case, separation between us and the planet, between us and other humans. Our spiritual crisis is our relationship with the natural world. Loy says our response is not just reducing our carbon footprint, but to understand our relation to the earth, our delusion that we're separate from it, that we should use it for our own pleasure and power. Loy says we wreak havoc with other species. We don't have what we want, have little power with purpose without pleasure, look outside ourselves to fill the lack. We are obsessed with growth and progress, a model that we cannot sustain. We imagine that in the future we'll have enough and we'll be filled up and happy. We're obsessed with power and control because we're not grounded in the natural world. Our role must be healing of ourselves and the earth. Loy closed by quoting Joanna Macy, and I have to say all 16 of the speakers quoted Joanna Macy, who was one of the speakers, she's 94, who says, hope is not all that useful. She says, hope is about the future. We're living in the now. Loy says, ecology is an economic crisis. Corporate consumer capitalism is collective greed and self-delusion. Ask the question, what do I have to offer? What tugs at my heart? And he really emphasized that our work is only effective if we're exhilarated by it. He emphasized, do what excites you. In Resources for a Compassionate Planet, a monk from Plum Village, who now lives in California, Brother Young, began with a guided meditation and then defended technology as a positive support toward healing the planet. He said technology gives voice to the earth. It's good for it in many ways. For instance, it allows us to communicate without the harmful effects of travel. From a Himalayan state of India, a woman named Tequila acknowledged the needs of indigenous people all over the world, reminded us that those people are fighting against the exploitation of the planet, that their responses to the practices that cause global warming include anger, fear, anxiety, and worry about future generations. Blaming doesn't work, she said. We have to have a paradigm shift in systems like capitalism so we can live in harmony. Brother Young responded that it's rituals that connect us, so that what happens to us internally affects others in the planet. We must embody rituals and translate sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them, into action. He asked, how do you not let the news drag you down? How do you stay compassionate? Tequila answered, I'm a scientist. I study interdependence. We are animals, a herd, and we require a family. The third panelist, Alyssa Apple, a climate and health professor at the University of California, offered, the recent fires in California led to unprecedented stress, which led to avoidance, turning away from news and information. A healthy response to a communal existential threat is communal resilience, social movements. We can't know the future, but we can connect to community and pay attention to science. We know that a contemplative mindset is essential to combating avoidance of our problems. Fire season moves people into stress fear mode, but we can sidestep despair by staying calm and clear-headed, gathering data, having contact with nature to restore purpose and joy. Tequila reminded everyone that the hyper-individualism of the West separates us, so we need to make sure children are grounded in mindfulness and community. My most visceral experience during the summit followed Conda Mason's guided meditation at the beginning of the last session. Those of you who were born after the mid-60s will not remember the initial impact of the picture, but the most impactful environmental photo ever taken was Earthrise, the blue marble, the picture of our planet, taken from outer space on the trip to the moon. We were all stunned by the image, had never imagined our planet without borders, and had not realized that the farther away we traveled, the more beautiful our home was. Everyone we knew had the picture in their house. It was in Life magazine, and I think everyone in the country tore out the picture and hung it on their wall. But we had ours hung in the bathroom, and we looked at it every day until we moved. Conda asked each of us to zoom in on a place on Earth that takes our breath away, and then she gave us time to sit silently and picture that place, and I encourage you to do that this week. She closed by saying, all that rises will pass away. It's important to be right here, right now. Willa Blythe Baker of Clark University spoke on the alchemy of despair. Baker says despair means something we love is at risk. We see it as something to turn away from or something to fix. Despair leads to expecting less, suspending our energy, and feeling separation, for example, from the planet. Can we feel and accept despair without getting stuck in it? I have ordered Paul Hawken's book, Regeneration, for our library. It arrived a couple of days ago, and I just finished the page about toilet paper, which says, stay away from Charmin. It is depleting the boreal forest, which will not be replaced. Avoid Kimberly Clark, and anyway, I'll put the book downstairs, but there are specific things we can do to help save forests. Paul Hawken reminds us that in the movies, a hero always shows up to save us and to save the day. But this is not going to happen in the case of climate change. We have to find each other. How do we facilitate the waking up? We have to look at the pain and damage. The Nigerian writer Ben Okri, who won the Booker Prize, says we don't, and this really caught my attention, we don't see the species that have disappeared. We don't recognize them, we don't look at them, they're not part of our lives. So we don't miss them. We think we don't miss them. If we don't see it, we don't feel it. People say they stop watching the news or they can't stand to look at the pain or it's uncomfortable. Okri says, what will happen if we choose not to look is way worse than what we need to look at. Ruth Ozeki reminds us that that's what art is for, to create a world where it's safe to look at what scares us. Artists can't tell us how to fix things, but they can make us comfortable looking at the problems and asking the right questions, working together to find solutions. Ozeki and Okri agree that meditation allows them to face the day when they're pessimistic. Okri says, it calms our panic. The truths don't frighten us, it's the panic. Meditation helps us be calm and, he says, restores us to our magnificence. He spoke on the pessimism of the intellect, the optimism of the will. How do we hold these two things in opposition? As Buddhists, we're used to holding things in opposition. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Thank you.
Page 12, 19.
May there this country preaching in all places, so that we in every century together can realize the Buddha way. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The Dharmas are boundless. I vow to master